He's one of the best people I know, as far as off the court. We communicate on and off the court as much as possible. I feel like I can call him anytime. He's not like a head coach that will sit back and just watch his other coaches and colleagues just train other players. He's always involved. He'll get out there and play with you if he wants. It's just great to have a young coach like him in the building.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster and SeatGeek. Today's podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek, and if you download the mobile app and use the easiest way to buy tickets, and use the promo code LOFANTASY, and that gets you a $20 rebate on your first purchase. It's another of the team preview podcasts. I'm joined by the veritable duo from the Locked On Lakers podcast, Anthony Irwin and Harrison Faigen. Welcome, Anthony first.
How's it going? It's great to be on this podcast. I'm just really excited to start talking about actual basketball again after this offseason.
Yeah, we've still got a little bit of time to actually see some play on the court, but it's pretty exciting. Most of the guys I've had on so far, once we start getting into the teams, they get pretty fired up just waiting for it to come. So I apologize that I'm getting you guys excited a little bit early. Harrison, it's good to have you here as well.
Yeah, it's good to be on here. Anthony and I actually both play fantasy basketball, so we're going to try and pick up some tips from you. You know, we came in first and second place in our league last year. Not to brag, we don't have to get into who got in first and who got in second place, but we were the top two teams.
All right, cough if you won first place. All right, sorry, that was weird. I don't know how that happened.
You should get a lozenge or something.
I was talking to Anthony on Twitter the other day, and I was mentioning that the current leagues I've got running, we've got a 12-hour limit on our picks, and you seemed a little incredulous at that, Anthony.
I thought you were joking.
No, it's seriously 12 hours, because I've got people from Australia, people from the States, I've got people from Norway and France, and there's all time zones all over the place. So we just make it, you can go on there, you make your pick, you get an email when it's your turn, it runs over about 3 weeks, and everyone's happy.
I mean, I guess if people understand it going into it, you know, if you understand that that's what the situation is, and you know that that's going to take place over that amount of time, you kind of deal with it and you adjust to it. But yeah, I get kind of, I guess, frustrated with fantasy drafts right now for football, because that's what's going on right now, and you get to like round 9, 10, 11, whatever. And people are taking their full minute and a half allotment to figure out which guy that they hope that they never actually sees time on their team.
It gets frustrating in this sort of format as well sometimes. But at least with this one, you're just not on your computer watching it. You can let it all pass. You get an email. Hey, it's my pick. Let me go in. Let me take 20 minutes to see what else has happened beforehand. Make your pick. If you're asleep, if you're out with family or friends, you can come back in a couple of hours and get it done. And again, with the time zones, we had to do it that way, but I thought I'd explain it to you in person here so you understood. It wasn't totally crazy. It wasn't like people were sitting down in front of their computers for 3 weeks without food or drink or bathroom breaks or anything just so they could make picks.
Well,
Right,
hey, you don't know what your friends are doing. You know you don't do that,
That's
but
true.
you know, maybe a couple of them.
That they might have to peel them off their seats at the end of the 3 weeks.
At the 11th hour and 59th minute, they're just like, I don't know who to take up between kickers. I just couldn't imagine it.
All right, we're going to talk Lakers, and we're going to talk Lakers fantasy stuff. Now, you guys are host of the Locked On Lakers podcast. You guys have a heap of good stuff going over there. One of the more popular Locked On podcasts in our network. You know, what have you guys got planned for the coming? Now, we're recording this and we're releasing it in a couple of days. So, you guys, what stuff is happening on the Locked On Lakers show at the moment?
Go ahead, Harrison.
You know, to say that we plan things out in advance, I think is giving us a little bit too much credit. We kind of tend to go with the flow and what's going on in the news. So during August, that hasn't been a whole lot. So we've had to kind of wing it a little bit. But, you know, mostly we just try to round up kind of what's going on around the Lakers that day or over that 2 day. I think next week we'll be back on daily podcast. So it'll be just whatever's going on that day. That's what we're going to talk about. And we try to keep it as current as possible. We have a couple recurring segments. I do my hot takes generally every Monday, where I try to come up with the hottest take possible and surprise Anthony with it. We have an ongoing game that we're going to continue to play throughout the season called Brandon Ingram or Kevin Durant. Uh, so we have a couple. We try to have fun with it, but nothing big planned right now, other than that we're going to be doing our position previews next week, where we'll spend like one day talking about the team's point guard situation, a day talking about the team's shooting guard situation. But I think that'll be a thing throughout the whole Locked On network.
Yeah, it definitely will be across the whole network. Every team podcast will be doing those previews during the week. Now, Anthony, you mentioned football, and that's a perfect time for me to mention to everyone that football's back. So SeatGeek's the smartest and easiest way to find tickets for the games that you want to see up close and in person this season. There's nothing like being in the stadium for the biggest plays of the year, and with SeatGeek, it's never been easier to get the seats you want for great value. SeatGeek has the best deals on every ticket in the house, wherever you want to sit, whether on the 50-yard line, the club seats, or the upper level. Now, I've got the SeatGeek app on my phone. I'm sure both of you guys do as well. And it's easily the best way to shop for tickets. You can be wherever you want. All you need is a few taps on the phone. You can instantly find the seats for this weekend or any game this season. With SeatGeek, you always get the best deal on every ticket because SeatGeek's price compares for you by searching multiple ticket sites. The prices can vary depending on where you shop, but SeatGeek will always find you the lowest available price. And SeatGeek wants you to help you get the most bang for your buck. That's why every ticket on SeatGeek is given a grade based on value. You'll immediately see any underpriced seats and be able to find the best deals that fit your budget. Plus, every ticket you buy on SeatGeek is backed by their 100% guarantee. Plus, all you listeners to this podcast get a $20 rebate off your first SeatGeek purchase. To get your $20 rebate, download the SeatGeek app, go to the setting tab and click add a promo code and use the promo code LOFantasy. SeatGeek will then send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code LOFantasy today. All right, let's get into talking fantasy. Let's get into talking Lakers. The first question, these are questions that I'm asking the other fantasy analysts over at Basketball Monster. We're each asking each other these three questions, so I'm throwing it to all the hosts that come on the podcast. Anthony, we'll start with you for this one. Can you see any way in which Larry Nance overtakes Julius Randle for the starting job this season?
I actually do, and this isn't to disparage Julius Randle. Pardon me, I literally just got a root canal today, so if I'm a little sketched out with the speech, that's what's going on there. But with Randle and Nance, I think Nance fits the starting lineup better than Julius Randle does, and I think Julius Randle might be the better overall player than Nance. And the issue with Randle though is that he needs the ball to be successful. And when you have guys like D'Angelo Russell or, Jordan Clarkson, both in the lineup, and they both, happen to need the ball to be successful and to get everybody else involved, I think there's a little bit of overlap of skill in that starting five that could be aided with Larry Nance Jr. stepping in and just having to catch the ball, shoot the ball, dunk the ball. And again, that's not to say that Randle isn't the better player or however people might feel about that. I just think it's a fit thing. And if that does happen, I like Nance to be, I don't know if he'll be ownable in fantasy because I don't think he'll get more than 20 to 25 minutes a game. But I think it could possibly happen.
If he gets to 30 minutes a game, then he's definitely ownable because he's got, ahead of what Randle can do, he can do more stuff defensively, so he can block more shots, he gets more steals, and he could be a guy in 30 minutes that could block a shot a game and get 1.2 steals, and potentially, this is maybe a stretch, but stretch out to 3 and give you 0.2 threes a game. Score a bit, rebound a bit, be solid-ish with his percentages, but not fantastic, but still give you a good field goal percentage. But I think you're right that if he did get the starting job, his minutes wouldn't be up at 28 or 30. He'd be 24, 23, that sort of range. Now, Harrison, the other possibilities is that neither of these guys start. We could run Brandon Ingram and Luol Deng at the 3-4. How do you see them using that power forward spot to open up the season?
That's an interesting thing that we've kind of been debating all summer, and we really don't know because Luke Walton hasn't really, shockingly, he hasn't decided on what his rotation is going to be as of August. He wants to see these guys in training camp first.
I don't know what's wrong with that.
Yeah, that's not really surprising that we don't really know a whole lot considering that a new coach is coming in. I think that we will see a lot of that lineup with Dang at the 4 and Ingram at the 3, just because that was Dang's most effective position last year when he was playing the small ball 4 for Miami. So I think it would be kind of a waste for the Lakers not to use him there in minutes. I don't anticipate him starting there, at least not right off the bat, but I do think that down the stretch, there is a chance that they play around with that starting lineup in order to get Ingram into the starting lineup.
Deng, you mentioned in Miami, he was much more effective when he played the 4. In terms of his fantasy rank, it jumped 20, 30 spots when he went from the 3 to the 4 when Bosch was out. It fits what he's able to do. And at this point in his career, he is more of a small ball 4. He increased his rebounding rate significantly, and he became a top 100 guy. Now, I don't think that he's a guy that I want to reach for inside the top 100 this season, but I do think that he plays more minutes than Randall, and I do think he plays more minutes than Ingram this season, and he should be a guy getting 30 minutes, at least for this season, maybe next season, and then they start to really transition him into a more of a reserve role. But he's a solid guy across the board. Steals, a couple of threes, decent scoring, solid rebounding, solid percentages. A real, just nothing stands out, but everything he does is very solid across the board. If you're looking in a rotisserie league, he's really good in the end rounds there. He doesn't stand out to me much in head-to-head, and he's not a guy that I'm reaching inside the top 100 because, as you mentioned, we don't know what they're going to do. They might, by January, move him to a 28-minute role a night as Ingram gets more comfortable with things. So there is some definite unknowns with Deng and Nance and Randall as well. We don't know how any of this is going to work. In terms of, I talked about Nance's fantasy potential. Randall doesn't have much fantasy potential to me at all. He grabs a lot of rebounds, yes, but everything else he does is below average. He doesn't get steals or blocks, doesn't hit threes, doesn't get rebounds. His both percentages are below average. They're not horrifically below average, but they're not great, and we'd need to see something from him to really elevate him into being an upper echelon or even a top 80 sort of fantasy guy. Anthony, what can Randall bring extra that we didn't see last season?
Well, I think first and foremost, because Luke Walton is going to bring a system more predicated on spacing, that his performance at the rim is going to improve, right? Where last year he was catching the ball and he had to finish consistently over, on average, you would say 1.5 or 2 people at the rim pretty consistently. And if he was dribbling, it would be in very tight spaces. So he couldn't really create space for himself. And I think because of that, his field goal percentage, as well as just the natural improvement that's going to occur over it was basically his rookie season last year to his second year. I think that'll improve combined with the spacing. I think you'll see a little bump there. He'll never be anything near a 3-point guy. Like, you mentioned with Nance, you said that maybe he might be able to step out and provide, you know, what'd you say, 0.2 threes a game or something like that.
Yep.
I Randall still won't even sniff that. So I don't think that's something that you'll really look for. The other thing that I'm kind of interested in is in running a more effective pick and roll, where last year when they were running pick and rolls, it was more of not a very well set screen, and then it was a immediate post up in very poor spacing for Randall. And I'll be interested to watch this year when in pick and rolls he'll have a little bit more space, and the hope is that he'll make quicker decisions, and that might give him a bump in assist rates to give him a little bit more value there. But again, I just, for me, the golden rule in fantasy is opportunity in minutes, right?
Yep.
And the Lakers have so many potential fours, that I don't know if there'll be enough minutes for anybody in that 4 spot to be consistently ownable.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is that Ingram, Deng, Nance, Randall, all those guys have got to get minutes at 2 positions, and they all could stake their claim to get 28 to 32 minutes. You could all make an argument for all of them to get that sort of run, and there's just not that sort of playing time there. Now, you talked about minutes and opportunity, Harrison. I'll go to you because this next question is about a guy who's going to absorb a huge amount of opportunity, a huge amount of usage, and a massive increase in minutes, and that's D'Angelo Russell. He's getting a lot of hype in fantasy circles as well. Can he live up to that hype? Will he become this player who flourishes under Luke Walton? At the start, that quote was from him, talking about because he didn't have the greatest relationship with Byron Scott. I'm sure that's somewhat of an understatement. He's obviously meshing well with Luke at the moment. what does he become this season? How big a step does he take forward in an offense that's not from straight out of 1981, and with a coach that actually shows some faith in him?
Well, that's what was interesting when you were talking. We were kind of talking about before. We have no idea how those front court minutes are going to be distributed between Dang and Randall and Nance Jr. And the first thing I thought of was that we have a lot more clarity in the backcourt, where it really looks like Luke Walton is going to give D'Angelo Russell the reins and kind of all the possessions and decision making opportunities that he can possibly handle as a sophomore guard, just because of that trust that you kind of talked about. And so I think that Russell is kind of is primed for a jump, especially in fantasy production, just because I would imagine he's going to play more minutes this season. And I think that he's going to be more efficient because, like you said, the Lakers aren't going to be running an offense out of 1981 anymore. And I just think that Russell is going to be their first option whenever he's on the floor, and the ball is going to be in his hands to make decisions. Now, whether or not that ends in assists, or more often it's probably going to end in shots, but I think that he's going to have kind of all the opportunities that he can handle.
I think that he leads the team in scoring this season, to be honest. I think he's going to have an absolute monster campaign. I think he's going to be a guy. I can't see any situation where he really doesn't get 34 minutes a night. He's young. The backups behind him, Huertas and Calderon, like, not guys that need development.
That was the other thing I was going to mention. Yeah, there's nobody to take minutes from him other than maybe Clarkson if they decide they want to play him a bunch at the one, but that doesn't seem like the direction they're heading.
And there's so much usage to be absorbed from Kobe last year. If you look at go to NBA Wowie and have a look at the on-off numbers when Russell plays with Kobe and when he was playing on the court when Kobe was on the bench, and all his usage rates, his field goal attempts, his assist rates, same with Clarkson, they all went through the roof. And that's what we can expect basically this season, because Deng comes in and replaces Bryant, but it's a completely different situation. We're not talking about a guy shooting 25 times and shooting 30%. Slight exaggerations there, but those shots have got to go somewhere, and they're going to Russell and they're going to Clarkson. So the average draft position for Russell on Yahoo at the moment is 110, which is probably 60 spots too low. You don't have to. I think he's going to be a top 50 candidate this season. You don't pick him in the top 50, but if you get him in the 70s, I think I grabbed him in the 60s in a draft that we're doing at the moment. Might have even been the 50s. But when you look at these guys and you talk about, okay, where's the floor of them? And it's Calderon, it's Huertas, like, who's taking the minutes, who's taking the shots, who's taking anything that he does? It just is no real way I see that happening. Anthony, can you see a way that Russell doesn't take a step forward, even just from pure volume?
Well, right. There's no way that. I mean, he was already pretty good last year for a rookie, and I think the narrative got out of control as far as what happened off the court, what did he do on the court. I think that all kind of that spun completely out of control, thanks to, I thought, an overall lazy narrative. And the other thing too, that as Harrison was talking, that I started thinking about, and this is purely anecdotal, just from things that I was able to watch, and this is purely intangible, but of all the players on the Lakers, Russell's success seems to drive the most people on that roster, right? Where when Russell is doing some, in moments last year, in big moments last year, where he hit those threes that led to him pointing to his arm and saying, "There's ice in my veins," right? You saw the rest of the roster just go nuts, and this was a roster that had Kobe, so that's the obvious disclaimer. But then in Summer League, it was the same kind of thing, where anytime Russell did anything of note, people just kind of really went with it more than anybody else on the roster. And I think that's going to drive a complete 180 on how people see him this year, where, somebody who was considered a chemistry issue last year is going to be looked at as, hey, is this guy, more mature? Is this guy whatever, this, that, and the other? And that's going to lead to more opportunity. And that's even more opportunity compared to whatever happened last year. I think I actually really like what you said with the top 50 player. And I actually would say, and it's a good stats on a bad team kind of thing. Yep. That's kind of how this is going to play out. But I could see him being even higher than that. Yeah, I could see him really, really kind of being the kind of guy who wins fantasy leagues for players this year.
If you're getting him outside the top 100 and he turns in a top 50 season, that is a key part to winning your league. Harrison, do you think Lou Williams will sit and have lunch with him this season?
No, maybe lunch. Remember, it was breakfast
Oh,
that he got
breakfast.
up from
Sorry,
the table. It was breakfast that he got. So,
the most important meal of the day.
maybe lunch is on the table this season. That's kind of like an olive branch. And then Lou Williams can think about whether or not he wants to eat cereal with Russell, or yeah, he's going to give him a chance at lunch. We'll see about the breakfast.
Well, if we're going to be talking about sitting down and eating, that segues me beautifully into talking about a man that's synonymous with chairs, and that's Yi Jianlian. The Lakers signed him to a creative contract. $8 million if he plays, I think 59 games, guaranteed just for $250,000, and they can cut him at certain points during the season where there's certain incentives for games played. Now he comes in to this rotation. He's a backup 4 and 5. I'd say Harrison, he probably plays more at the 5. What does he do to guys like Randall or Nance, or is he more just going to be an exclusive 5?
I would imagine he's going to be an exclusive 5 under Luke. Again, we talked about, we don't really know how
Yep.
Luke's going to want to play, but just the fact that they have so many guys at that 4 position, and for the fact that I don't know that, I mean, he's not going to really defend 5 super well, but he's definitely not going to be able to defend kind of mobile 4s when teams go small. So I would imagine he's almost exclusively a 5 this year, backing up Mozgov.
Yeah, just think about if you guys played the Hawks and he had to go out onto Paul Millsap, it'd be an absolute disaster to try and get him to cover a guy like that. And there's plenty of other examples of that all throughout.
Or Kevin Durant versus the Warriors.
Yeah, well, that's a nightmare for everybody. I tried not to go too because no one's got a chance of really stopping that too much. But he's a guy I don't really see him playing a huge role, and I don't agree that he's taking any minutes away from Nance or Randall. I just wanted to phrase that question out there. I don't think that's going to be the case. But what it does transition me talking the NBA draft, because one of my favorite players in the NBA draft, guys, was Ivica Zubac, who I was really excited for him to come to this team. I thought, yep, you know what? He doesn't have much of a competition for a starting center. They spent a bucket load of money on Mozgov. Now they brought E in. Now, Anthony Zubac, I think that he is a legit chance to start games this season. I think you might probably disagree with me, but I was obviously impressed with him in Vegas. I was impressed with him before then, so it wasn't a surprise for me to see how he played there. Can you just burst my bubble a little bit and tell me that he's going to play for the Defenders all season?
I don't know if he'll play for the Defenders all season, but I also don't know if he's going to get very many starts at all. Like, the only way I could see him getting starts is if Mozgov gets hurt,
Yeah, but
right?
that's pretty much guaranteed at this point with his knee. He's going to miss some. He's going to miss some games. He's not playing 82.
Right. Well, but it depends on when he misses those games. So if Mozgov kind of tweaks a knee early in the season and misses a couple weeks early in the season, I think the Lakers are, they try to get a little cute to make sure, or not to, obviously not to make sure, but I think they start Tarek Black over Zubats early on in the season. And then as the year goes along and the Lakers start, because I think the front office and the coaching staff are going to be a little bit more closely on the same page this year. I think as the year goes along and the season gets away from the Lakers, that's when I could start to see Zubats get a few starts, a handful of starts as the year, we're talking games 65 through 82.
Yep.
But when that happens, it'll be interesting. But even then, it's kind of like a scenario where we talked earlier with Larry Nance Jr. that even if Zubats gets those starts, I don't know if he'll be getting, anything more than 23 minutes a game. Mostly because I don't know if at this point in his state of physical maturity that I don't know if his body can handle the wear and tear of a 30-minute NBA game.
He's a little bit doughy as well, so that might have some sort of impact on that. Harrison, with Zubats, I really like what he can do from a fantasy point of view. His stats translate tremendously well. Good rebounder, really good scorer, solid touch around the rim, high field goal percentage, good free throw percentage. We saw him block a ton of shots in Vegas. He gets his hands on some balls to get some steals. I really just think it was one of the better picks in the entire draft. I would have had him in the 20s or maybe late teens. I know he didn't go there because he didn't want to be stashed and he had to come over, but the Lakers got themselves a really nice young center.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think I see what you're seeing with all of those stats that he's going to eventually be able to affect games with. But I agree with Anthony. I just don't know that he's ready to play 30 minutes a night to where he's going to be able to do that consistently in the NBA. I think he's going to spend a lot of time with the defenders this year. And I think down the stretch, if they're out of the playoff hunt, he'll see some minutes. But I don't know that he's going to be relevant from a fantasy
When
perspective.
when they're out of the playoff hunt, not if, when.
Oh, did I say if?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
when.
said if.
Okay, yeah. Excuse me, when they're out of the playoff hunt down the stretch of the season, he may get some minutes, but I just don't know that it's going to be enough to be production fantasy wise. I think in 1 or 2 years, that's when you're going to be wanting to look at Zubats as a serious fantasy candidate.
Now, this all said, in the league that Harrison and I are in, it completely overvalues bigs.
Yep.
Right. So if you're in the playoffs of your league, and Mozgov finds himself, the Lakers say, hey, we still have 3 more years on this contract. Let's kind of really ease you out of this year. And Tarek Black has shown for whatever reason that he wasn't ready to step in as a starter. And you're in the playoffs and you're looking for like the deepest of sleepers that have ever existed who might be able to win you, a matchup here or there. That's where I could see Zubats really falling into that fantasy lore of just guys who people just love from that point on. For me, it was Kendall Marshall a few years back. It was when he had D'Antoni, he won me a leg, and from that point on, he's one of my favorite players of all time.
Now, people who listen to this podcast, Anthony, he's not the deepest of sleepers because I've been going on about Zubats since early June, since a month before the draft, just telling you this is the guy that, when you're looking long term, in terms of all the rookies that come out projecting their fantasy stats, he was in the top 3 guys in terms of translations. If they all played the same amount of minutes, he'd be one of the top 3 ranked rookies out of the entire class that came out. It was him, it was Denzel Valentine, and Ante Zizic, who's from the Celtics, who's not coming across. In terms of just pure statistical production, if they all played the minutes the same, that those guys would be sitting right up the top. So I don't think he's going to have an impact this season, but if he gets 20 minutes a night, then he pushes into the realm of a league with even 18 teams, because we've got him projected at like 15 minutes a night over the course of the season, and that puts him inside the top 250 players. And that's, he gets more than that and starts playing 25 down the stretch, then he's a top 150 guy, and he's definitely going to be someone to watch. And when he makes his Laker debut, that is definitely a game I'm watching. He is very, very firmly up there in the list of my boys in the league, and I'm a big fan. So I just wanted to really broach that subject with you, so you could tell me how wrong I was that he wasn't going to play. But it's more just hope from me. I just want to get him out there because I think he's got a really bright future, and I think that Lakers fans should be really excited when he gets out. And I know they are, because the chance that he was getting in Vegas when he was on the court was pretty humorous for a guy that most people had probably never heard of.
Lakers fans. Lakers fans love him. There was when he was kind of on Twitter a couple weeks ago trying to figure out what his 2K rating was going to be. That I saw Lakers fans threatening to cancel their pre-orders if he wasn't in the game. Yes. He's a fan favorite before he's even played a real game for the team. So he's a lovable guy. You can kind of see why fans have become so attached to him. And he's definitely a fan favorite. I think his first game is going to rival Kobe's last game in terms of atmosphere.
Is Flea going to play the
I'm
national
100%
anthem?
Kidding, but
Is Flea going to do a bass solo national anthem for Zubac's first game? I hope so.
I hope not. That was really bad.
I've been trying really hard, and it's basically impossible to get a Megalex jersey, either a Zubats one or a Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot jersey, but they don't sell them. Those fluoro pink and green ones? You can't buy them.
Want one of those too. I couldn't find them anywhere on the internet after the draft. There was that Luwawu picture that was being used for every single article about him going into the draft, and I just wanted one of those jerseys.
I'll put you on my list because I've got about 4 people on my list. I had a listener to this podcast who is Serbian, and he had an auntie going across to Serbia who went to the club and asked for jerseys, and they said, no, we don't sell them to the public. They are only available to players in the team. So that's why you can't find them, because they just don't sell those jerseys anywhere. So I had someone go right to the source to ask that question. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it. But if anything changes, I'm going to let you know, because that is definitely the holy grail for me.
The solution is one of us needs to get good enough at basketball to join the team. I think that's our.
I may or may not have just scribbled down a note to myself that if this Luwawu guy plays well, that I'm going to tweet out. He should rename himself Timothy Luwawu Cabarrot.
Cool. I look forward to that tweet coming. He's good. I'm a fan of Luawu as well. I bought a Luawu t-shirt with the because I couldn't get the jersey. You had to buy the t-shirt with those colored logos on it that Max Rappaport was selling. I bought one of his t-shirts because it had those colors on it. Anyway, let's talk the draft. Let's talk Brandon Ingram. That's the player that's going to have somewhat of an impact this season, but I think his impact, some people might overstate it. We've already talked about the depth with Deng and Nance and Randall, who all sort of mixes in together. Ingram struggled a bit, Anthony, in Summer League. His shot didn't fall. He's thin. He's one of the thinnest people I've ever seen in my life. He gets pushed around, and that's against a bunch of D-leaguers and European type level players. When he gets into the NBA, he is going to struggle a lot initially. I don't think the Lakers are going to push him into big minutes initially because of this issue with him needing to work his way in. And to me, that makes him not a desirable fantasy target. How do you see them working him in this season?
One, you mentioned that he was the skinniest person that you've ever met. You obviously haven't met Harrison. and two, so regarding what you said, so before we went on the air, I was kind of thinking to myself, who on the Lakers has a chance to be ownable?
Yep.
Right. And that's kind of how I see quality of players. Who is somebody I could actually see on my team as the year goes along? And obviously Russell, we already talked about Russell, but aside from that, because of a minute allotment issue, I don't really see many other people. Maybe Dang, but his opportunity, actually producing on the court is kind of the ceiling's extremely low. If Ingram is successful this year, and it's, I wouldn't say it's very likely that it is successful, but if he does come out and impress enough to get himself carve out a genuine and generous niche playing time wise, I actually think, because of what he provides defensively, get a steal or two a game. He'll shoot pretty well, I think, from 3-point range. He actually gets to the free throw line pretty well because of his length. And because of how long he is, he can rebound. I don't think he'll be anybody that, will blow anybody away in terms of each individual category of what he can do, but he'll be somebody who, again, if he is successful, can stat this, the line well enough that you say, you know what, all right, I didn't anticipate this, but he actually played pretty well.
I think by the end of the season, by maybe January or February, which is, unless you're a freak like Karl Anthony Towns, that's the time when rookies really start to make an impact. Ingram would start to do it then, but prior to that, he's going to be a guy, I think, for November and December that finds himself outside the top 250 players just because he's not a great free throw shooter. He's going to have issues with his field goal percentage, so they're going to be big drains. He's not going to be able to play big minutes to start off with, but what he is, he's a guy, and I like to call it a 1-1-1, Anthony, guys that can average a 3, a steal, and a block per game. That is what he can do. So his upside is tremendous, but you're going to carry him on your roster for the first 2, maybe 3 months, and he's giving you almost a 0. That's gonna be great in February if he starts getting 30 minutes and playing really well. That's great, but you won't have a playoffs to push into because you've kept a 0 on your bench for three, not even on your bench, in your active roster for 3 months, and it hasn't worked out. So he's not someone that I'd be targeting in drafts. And ridiculously, he's going 4 picks after D'Angelo Russell, which is just
that's ridiculous.
It is ludicrous, and that is why Russell is a massive steal. And if you're taking Ingram at that same spot, it's not going to work out well for you. Harrison,
I wouldn't even draft Ingram at all.
He shouldn't be
honestly.
drafted, I don't think. Look, maybe there are some situations where you don't have to rotate the players in every day. A rotisserie format, a weekly league where you can literally just put him on the bench and never use him until, say, February. That's okay. But if you've got to use him every day, it's not going to work out for you. Harrison, do you think that he has got the highest ceiling out of this entire draft class?
The current one that he was just drafted in. I still think Simmons has a little bit of a higher ceiling, but I think Ingram has the higher floor. I think he's the guy that is like Simmons. If his shot doesn't start to come around, Anthony's favorite comparison to make, and one that I kind of agree with, is that he's a taller Rajon Rondo, which is still like a pretty good player. But I just think Ingram, with his defense, with his length, with his 3-point shooting, his ability to get to the free throw line, his ability to create his own shot because of his length, I just think that he's going to, at the very least, be a solid player, if not an all-star.
Which one's because a lot of the time, free throw percentage and 3-point percentage it's closely correlated. But Ingram's a guy that's a sub 70% free throw shooter, but a 40% 3-point shooter. Like, which one of them is real? Does the 3-point percentage come back, or does the free throw percentage take a big step up?
I would say it meets somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Where they both kind of they both kind of come down and go up about simultaneously. If I had to choose one or the other, I would say that the free throw percentage comes up because the free throw just seems like a more natural thing. And the other thing with him is that he's super young, right? And with him being as young as he is, he might still be getting used to, the mechanics of shooting a shot from so close compared to, like, if you watch Randall's shot, he actually has a fairly fluid 3-point shot, but if he shoots anything in the mid range, it looks completely awkward because he's too strong almost to make it work. With Ingram, his arms are so long that the leverage gained with his elbow position, it lends itself well right now to the 3-point shot, but I think it overcompensates for a free throw, and I think eventually he'll be able to figure that out, if not this year, but in the very near future.
He could be one of those guys that comes in and shoots 68% this season, but then in 2 years' time, we see him knocking down 82% of his free throws, and that's a huge jump. But we saw a couple of guys do it last season, take significant leaps like that, and he could be one of those players, definitely. Anthony, we'll stick with you. We'll talk free agency. We've talked about Deng a fair bit, but what about the big ticket item? What about Tim Mozgov on that contract that the Lakers had to get signed as soon as midnight struck? the big number one target, Tim Mozgov, comes in. Okay, so we've heard the contract get bashed. We've heard all that sort of stuff. But can he actually produce for this team? Can he get 30 minutes or not? Or is he just going to be a plotter that plays 25 minutes and does some good stuff, does some defensive stuff? He's had some big games. He's had a 29-point-20 rebound game when he was back in Denver a couple of years ago. But he feels so far removed from that. Can you give me a positive with Mozgov?
I think the arc that I see from Mozgov this year, and I love that something fell in the background for whoever. It was almost like somebody just threw something thinking about the contract.
No, I actually that's funny. I wasn't intending to make that sound effect, but there was a giant, like some type of mosquito-looking thing that just landed next to me, so I killed it with a stapler. So we can't put up the no animals were harmed in the making of this podcast disclaimer this week. Sorry, Josh.
I'll make sure I remove it.
So we anyway, but with Mozgov, I would say so in again in the league that Harrison and I are in, I think he'll be ownable because double doubles, offensive and defensive rebounds is a stat. Yeah. But I think in general, I think people will be kind of not very impressed with what he provides, and everything that he provides will be early in the season, and I think it'll tail off at the end of it. So I think if you do draft him, and if you do, it'll be way late in the draft. But if you do draft Mozgov, get ready to trade him right after the All-Star break, because that's when the Lakers will really start insisting on getting Tarek Black minutes and getting Ivica Zubac's minutes and trying out lineups where Larry Nance Jr. or Julius Randle play at the 5. But long term, I don't think Mozgov will be somebody who anybody looks back and says, oh man, I'm really happy I had him on my team.
He's not a great,
including Lakers fans.
We got to throw out there was a video of him that came out I guess you guys will be hearing this Tuesday, so last week. He seemed to be hitting a lot of threes. So if he can kind of bring that to his game in the NBA, then that makes him a little bit. Yeah, stretch 5.
Timothy Mozgov.
But he's a solid. You know what he is? He's sort of like a poor man's Robin Lopez, which isn't saying much because Robin Lopez is a poor man's fantasy player anyway. But he's just that guy that gives you really solid percentages, great field goal percentage, nice free throw percentage. Yeah, a block a game, half a steal, 7 rebounds, 10 points, 11 points, just really solidish numbers, which is great as a last round pick without much upside. But if you're in, say, a 14-team league around 110, 120, that's fine because that's not your last round pick. But he's going to give those sort of numbers. But as you mentioned, it will tail off as the season kicks off or continues. He might be at 28 minutes for the first 2 months and then get into 22 and 20 and then not play once we head into March and into April. So that's definitely a concern. But the contract's probably not going to look great in a few years' time, but we're talking about now. And he's going to have somewhat of an impact because Zubac, as much as I love him, he's probably not ready to take on any sort of role. Now, Black's a guy that, we'll talk about him in a second, but he was curiously not used by Byron Scott last season, and we haven't seen for 4 or 5 years. Other free agents, well, he's the other guy. No one else really came to this team in fairness. Jose Calderon came across in a trade. Does he leapfrog Harrison? Does he leapfrog Marcelo Huertas for the backup point guard position?
I think he does. I think because I would imagine that they're going to end up valuing his 3-point shooting more than Huertas's creativity and kind of passing, because I think Calderon could do a little bit of that too. He's not going to be able to drive as much as Huertas does, but I think to start with, I would believe he's going to be the backup primary point guard. I think there will be times where Lou Williams kind of takes some of those minutes as well. But yeah, I would imagine that Calderon is the primary backup, I guess, pure point guard, if you want to use the cliche.
Yeah, because they're going to use Williams in that role. They'll use Jordy Clarkson in some of that role as well.
Yep.
Harrison, who's your breakout candidate on this team? It could be someone we've already touched on, but who's having a big step forward?
I mean, it's Russell.
Yeah,
I think for all the reasons that we talked about, I don't really see anyone else as a giant breakout candidate for your fantasy team.
Well, if you don't mind, Josh, what are your thoughts on Jordan Clarkson? Because I've thought about him extensively, honestly, longer than I really should have.
I think
I have no idea what he can do.
No, I think he's going to be good. I think that he's going to be. Now, when he played his rookie season, I drafted him in a dynasty league before his rookie season because I knew there was something there about him. He blew my expectations out of the water in that post All-Star run that he had, and that was without Kobe. But he was playing a point guard role. He took a step back last season because of Kobe and because of the fact that he played off the ball. Now, he's going to continue to play off the ball, so he's never going to approach those numbers that he had in that stretch between February and April in 2015. He's never going to get back to that, but I think he's going to be a solid scorer. He's improved his three-point shooting a lot. He's going to be one of those guards who gives you 3 to 3.5 assists, 4.5 to 5 rebounds, 2 triples, 18, 19 points, 1.5 steals a game he can get to. He's got to improve his defense, but we talk about Russell going at pick 110 or Clarkson's going at pick 107. That's still 30 spots too low for me. I think he's going to be a guy that does take a step forward, and it's him and Russell that are going to absorb majority of Kobe's usage, I think.
Yeah, I want to agree. I'm just concerned about how much usage Russell will absorb because I really think for most of it, he's going to be starting almost all of the offense, especially in pick and roll sets with Clarkson kind of spotting up. And I've never liked having guys on my team who just kind of spot up unless they're the Ray Allen or Kyle Korver types of this world who you could just mark down for 3 or 4 or 5 3-pointers a game. I would like to see, or if I'm drafting Clarkson, it's with the hopes that he plays a lot with the second unit, and in that time with the second unit gets to create a little bit more and pick up maybe assist or 2 more per game than you anticipate.
Well, last season after the All-Star break, he averaged 14.7 shots a game. I've got him projected at just an extra 2 shots a game this season. So I don't think that's not outlandish to say he's going to attempt 2 more shots a game. He could actually get more, and that puts him in that 18 point per game sort of mark if he has an increase in his shooting, which we think I've only gone conservative and said maybe his 3-point percentage jumps by 1% and his field goal percentage jumps by 0.5%, but getting those extra couple of shots puts him into that 18-19 point bracket. He gets a few more touches. His assist rate was higher with Kobe off the court. He's going to have that same situation again. I think that he is a significant sleeper type guy that if you're getting him at pick 90, it's still great value. Harrison, what do you think?
And I was going to say it's become an overused trope to kind of compare all of the Lakers to the Warriors just because that's where Luke Walton's coming from. But one thing that we did see I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. One thing that we did see with the Warriors, the last several years is how they were still able to get Klay Thompson the ball at times and let him be a ball handler, even with Steph Curry on the court at times. So I think that you're still going to see Clarkson getting the ball, and I think that he's going to get to attack a scrambled defense in certain situations, and I think that you're going to see him as the primary ball handler with the second unit a lot of the time. So I do think that he's going to get his usage. I don't think that he's going to be as valuable as Russell from a fantasy perspective by any means, but yeah, I think he'll be good.
All right, pop quiz, guys. He's going to be a contributor in numerous categories. Blocks isn't going to be one of them. How many blocks did he have all of last season?
Jordan Clarkson?
Yep.
3.
I'd say 1.
He had 7. So you guys you went a bit under, but 7 is still just ludicrously small. It's one every 10 games. It's more than it's less than one every 10 games. It is just a ludicrously small amount. So don't expect him to get any blocks. His rookie season he had 12.
Well,
so yeah, he's had a total of 19 blocks in his career 140 games. So not
well,
not a big shot blocker. Yep.
fun fact, you have to play defense in order to get blocks. So,
yeah, that's true.
If he starts doing that, then he's already on track to kind of up that number.
Definitely. He's we don't know if he can play defense. We'll have to wait and see. But he's a guy that I think is going to be a great value player heading into this season again. Given that draft position on Yahoo, it is just ludicrously low. Not as bad as Russell, but still, he's going to be to get a guy of 19 points where you can get him at pick 100. You don't get guys at that sort of scoring and that sort of shot attempts and the other stats he's going to bring at that point. There's just no one available around there, so he probably won't end up going at that spot. People will start getting him higher, but he's a guy that I'm pretty interested in to see exactly what he can do this season. Now, Anthony, you touched on Lou Williams. He feels like a forgotten man to me a little bit with Russell and Clarkson assuming a bigger role. He started last season. He went from the sixth man at the Raptors, came across, started a stack of games for the Lakers, played more minutes, but I think that he moves back into that role that he filled with Toronto. Do you think that that's how Walton runs it? He plays those mid to low 20s in minutes, still does what he does with his shooting, gets some assists, gets some steals, and he's sort of going to be that borderline 120, 100 type player.
So I think with Lou, the big question with Lou is whether or not he gets enough shot attempts to really affect your percentages, because he is for a chucker, he's the rare efficient chucker. And if he does get enough usage with that second unit in pseudo isolations or in isolations late in the shot clock, that he gets to just draw fouls and he shoots enough free throws to help you out if you own a center who you're concerned. Let's say you own like DeAndre Jordan isn't a good example because he shoots so many free throws anyway. But if you own
Steve Adams is the guy. I think he's the perfect example.
Perfect. So yeah, so if you own like a Steve Adams, Lou Williams is a good way to mitigate what Adams is kind of lacking from the free throw line. For me personally, I won't be looking to draft Lou because I don't quite know what his role is going to be right now. But if Luke does use him and just goes away from it, because last year the issue was Byron was trying to tell him, hey, go create for other people. And I think Luke felt uncomfortable with that. But if Luke just says, all right, just create for yourself, score whenever you possibly can, do so efficiently, then I think you'll see Lou on a few more fantasy teams this year.
Just basically be a better Jamal Crawford. I think that's the sort of role that he fits, because Crawford was terrible last season, but Williams can be better than that. Williams can be that sort of player exactly in those sort of minutes, step up when necessary, play some extra minutes at times. They'll run lineups, I think, with Russell, Clarkson and Williams in them for small stretches, but I think that they will do that at times just to get those quicker guys on, get some extra shooting happening. I can see that sort of thing happening. Tariq Black, Harrison, we know that Byron Scott in the front office, or it's come out now that they clashed over his use last season, and by use I mean not use because he just didn't see the court. He came across from Houston in the 2014-15 season after the Rockets waived him in order to sign Josh Smith, and I thought he did all right. I thought he looked decent in that time, but he didn't play at all. What are we going to see from him this season? Is he a guy that can develop into a serviceable rotation big?
Yeah, well, our commenters had a running joke where they called him Milk Carton all season because they were kind of looking for him and they had no idea where he was. Like his picture was on a milk carton. Because I thought that, like you said, when he came over from the Rockets and he started to get minutes in the second half of his rookie season, I thought that not only did he acquit himself well, but I thought that he was a big part of Jordan Clarkson's emergence over that time, because more often than not, he was the guy setting those picks for him and rolling down the lane to get Clarkson the space that he needed to get shots off on his drives. And I was just baffled by the fact that he was all but benched for the majority of last season. And it was just the weirdest thing with his coach saying that he needed to play more balls out and those types of things, when like if you needed to describe Tariq Black's playing style, it's balls out. Like he's your pure energy big. He sets solid screens, rolls to the rim, can catch a pass, can dunk an alley-oop. And he's undersized for a center, But for a guy coming in off your bench, I think he does a lot of the things that the Lakers point guards really need, especially with we're talking about Russell and how much more of a role he's going to have. And I think Timofey Mozgov's going to help him because he's also a really great screener. But when Mozgov's on the bench, I think Black is definitely a guy that you want in there setting those screens and rolling to the basket. And that's another part of the reason why I was kind of baffled by the signing, because I thought that Tarek Black was fine. It looked like he was finally primed to get those backup minutes, and now there's like this weird competition between him and a guy with a bunch of incentives in his contract.
Yeah, it is. It was a pretty weird move. Like, look, what you said about Scott last season, that quote that he had, it just made no sense. But the thing is, wasn't probably even in the top 30 dumb things that Byron Scott said last season. So that's one positive I can say for it. But it made no sense because exactly he is just a guy that goes out and tries as hard as he can. He's a real energy rebounder sort of guy. Like he's a guy that if he played 30 minutes a night, you'd know you'd get double-digit boards from him because he puts pressure on. He's a solid offensive rebounder as well. He's not a great shot blocker. He's not bad defensively. But in a fantasy point of view, he can shoot at a high percentage. He can grab a ton of rebounds. And if, like your guys' league, if you've got offensive rebounds in there and he's forced into action, he can pull 3 down. He can pull 4 down in a game and be a real energy big in that sort of sense. So it was a weird situation. Anthony, I want to talk to you about your namesake here, Anthony Brown, because he started some games last season, but he struggled a lot, had the broken foot. Now, I don't know what to make of this guy because at Stanford he was a 40% three-point shooter, but for the Lakers in Summer League, in the D League, he shot about 30%. He was a 3 and D guy, but can't shoot threes anymore. What's happened to him?
So the thing that I've noticed with his shot, and the big thing when you're going from level to level is time of opportunity, right? So if your window of opportunity in high school was a 10 out of 10, when you get to competitive college, it's now, a 5 out of 10. And then when you get to the pros, it's a 1 out of 10 in terms of how long you have by the time you catch the ball to the time that ball has to leave your hand on a release. And the issue with Anthony Brown is that he has a minor hitch in his shot. If you kind of watch it, the ball slides slightly to his right before he actually gets it out of his hand. And I think because of that, either he wants to fix the hitch altogether, which is really tough to do at his age, or that hitch is making it so that defenders are getting out on him, a little bit, they're within his comfort zone to where he's shooting the ball and they're right in his face, and that's affecting his release as well. If those are issues that he's carrying over from year to year, I don't know if he'll ever really be a good shooter. Because you look at, the model that people I always see on the internet is, well, Danny Green wasn't very good with Cleveland, and then he went to San Antonio, and all of a sudden he was, one of the better shooters in the NBA. Well, sure, but Danny Green always had a really quick release. He never had a technical reason why he wasn't a very good shooter. And with Anthony Brown, he has that technical issue. And I don't know if that's fixable. And if it is fixable, I don't know if he can get it done in the amount of minutes that he's not going to get this year.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Go, Harrison.
The thing that I've heard about Anthony Brown is it was a little bit of a leg issue last year, and he ended up having a leg injury that kind of shut down his season towards the end of it. But it sounds like there was a leg strength issue there that was causing him difficulty adjusting to the new 3-point line. Although obviously that wasn't fixed in summer league this year.
No,
Right. That's kind of what I come back to. Is that like he's supposedly healthy this year and he didn't impress in Vegas.
No, he had a real opportunity in Vegas as well to start showing what he can do, but he struggled. He didn't look great there at all. Harrison, what is your bold prediction for this team? It can be whatever you want. You can say record, you can say trade, you can say anything you want.
82-0.
Oh, that's pretty bold.
That'd certainly be bold. I don't think I guess this isn't that bold given what we've talked about, but somebody asked me a similar question the other day, and I said I don't really think that Brandon Ingram's going to be in the Rookie of the Year conversation because I just don't see the minutes and the opportunity there for him until later in the year. I think that a lot of the narrative's going to get started that, oh, he's disappointing a little bit, and Ben Simmons is averaging, this amount of points and this amount of assists for Philadelphia while he's using up 40% of their possessions. And I don't think that he's going to seriously be in the Rookie of the Year race.
I think that's fair enough, and I think that's going to be the case across the league. When you go through, and I've got to look at all these situations, there's not many rookies that are going to be in significant roles for the team. There's going to be Simmons, but who else? Buddy Hield, probably with Drew Holiday up, Buddy Hield gets a bigger run. I thought they'd run more with Moore at the 2, but now they'll probably play Moore at the 1, and that'll give Hield some extra run there. But none of these other rookies are in situations where they can just waltz straight in and play big minutes. So he might be in the conversation by default because no one else is getting a big role aside from Simmons. But yeah, I agree with you, obviously, in terms of him not being in the Rookie of the Year conversation. Anthony, have you got another bold prediction apart from 82-0? You want to just dial it back a bit?
All right. So my big bold prediction in terms of fantasy is that I think every single Laker who's in the starting 5 will be ownable. Whereas like last year, even guys who were in the starting 5 on the court consistently weren't ownable because of whether it was percentage, whether it was
Roy
efficiency.
Hibbert.
Yeah, there was nobody even on arguably the worst team in the NBA last year. You had a whole bunch of guys who couldn't, produce even in that situation. Whereas this year, I think Jordan Clarkson is ownable despite even questions there. D'Angelo Russell's ownable. Luol Deng's ownable. At least at the start of the year, Julius Randle will be ownable, and then as we talked about with Timothy Mozgov, he'll be on a fantasy roster. So I think at least at the start of the year, all of the Lakers starting 5 will be 65% owned or higher.
We've got 2 guys projected inside the top 100, but then we've got, now I have to count here, so this might take me a while. We've got 5 other guys projected between 100 and 150. And last season, I think Clarkson was the highest rated guy at about 110. So there's a definite change there with guys like Williams, Randall, Nance, Mozgov, Deng, all between 100 and 150, and then Clarkson and Russell inside the top 100. So, and if those minutes, if there's an injury and then Randall has to get more, or Nance has to play 30 minutes, or Deng plays 35 minutes because the depth gets thinned out somehow, then all those guys have potential to jump inside the top 100. So yeah, there's definitely more ability with a better coaching situation, a more clear cut, I guess, offensive hierarchy. Not that it was clear cut last year; it just wasn't a good one.
Good.
It wasn't
it wasn't smart. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's more common sense involved, and that's going to allow other players to get more involved, and the stats will flow that way. So yeah, I agree with you that sort of stuff will happen. I think we haven't talked about Nick Young. Does anyone want to say anything about Nick Young that doesn't involve the word Snapchat?
Oh, I thought that we were talking about players that were going to be on the team this year.
Yes. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say.
Because they didn't stretch him before that deadline for this season. They still can stretch him, but what do you think they do with him?
I think they're going to stretch him. I think they're holding out hope that they can find a trade for him, or I don't really know. Maybe there's something there where they want to give him an opportunity in training camp, but they were never going to stretch him before that deadline because it would stretch out his cap hit over 5 years instead of like being able to just pay his salary this year and stretch the final year over 3. I think it just financially and cap wise, it just made more sense to stretch him after the deadline anyway.
Regardless,
I could see a buyout. I could see a buyout happening. Just take the hit this year and then, maintain as much flexibility as you can moving forward.
Okay, so they've got 15 guys on the roster, including him. So if he's gone, out of the 3 other guys that they've got camp invites for at the moment, Julian Jacobs, Zach August, and Travis Ware, would you say, or is it someone else that would be likely to get that 15th spot?
I'd say August. He has the guaranteed money in his deal, so I'd go, and I think that he's the best player out of those guys pretty clearly.
I agree with
that. What I kind of found interesting today was the report that Philadelphia, because they brought in Elton Brand, might have to move one of the guys at the end of their roster. So they
got 16 guaranteed guys now.
Right, and you have guys like Sas Castillo, Nick Stauskas, who's I still think he's at least a shooter in the NBA, and if I'm the Lakers, he's a buy low candidate. The other guy, and his name is escaping me right now, is T.J. McConnell. It was somebody who I had people telling me that he would be somebody that the Lakers could or should look out. So if I'm the Lakers and I have maybe an extra second round pick or something like that, a conditional second round pick, maybe they make a move for that. But in terms of guys that are already had camp invites, I agree with Harrison. It's August, and it's not really close.
They got the 2 second rounders in exchange for absorbing Jose Calderon, so they've got a couple of spare second rounders floating around that they could make that sort of deal for. But the Sixers there, because they signed Elton Brand today, they've back to that 16-man situation. So unless it's a trade of Noel or Okafor coming, or they're cutting Stauskas or Hollis Thompson or any of those sort of guys, then they've got to do something. So something's going to move there, whether it's a big name or a smaller piece. But TJ McConnell would be a great fit, I think, in the Lakers, because they don't have a young point guard. They've got 2 old point guards. Yes, Huertas has only been in the league for 1 year, but he's 33 years old. You put McConnell in as the third guy. Develop him into a usable backup who's a good defender, who can shoot a little bit, who can pass. I think that he's a guy that other teams should definitely be looking at trying to acquire, because he's down the depth chart there in Philadelphia at the moment.
I was surprised by, because his it's at Laker Film Room was adding me about McConnell, and I mean, I haven't really watched enough film on him. I'm more of a Stauskas fan, just because I just think the NBA is a shooting league, so get as many shooters as you possibly can and try to make it work from there. But yeah, I mean, if he's a buy low candidate, you think you can make into a rotation player at 10 to 15 minutes a game, then McConnell might be the way to go.
The problem with Stauskas is he hasn't shown that he can shoot yet in the NBA at all. Yet he shot at Michigan, he handled the ball, he passed, he got assists. Hasn't done any of that, but it could happen. I still have a bit of faith in him as well. When the initial Sixers roster crunch came up, everyone was telling me, Stauskas is gone. He's gone. I don't think they're quite ready to give up on him, and I definitely wouldn't be ready to give up on him just yet. But I think we're digressing here, guys. Thank you, thank you for coming on, Harrison. Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter.
I am at HM Faigen, Faigen, and I at Lakers SBN is Silver Screen Rolls Twitter handle. That's the blog where I do all of my writing, and yeah, and you can also find our podcast at Locked On Lakers.
Great stuff, Anthony. Where's what's Twitter handle have you got to plug and other stuff that you want to throw out there?
Well, like Harrison said, at Locked On Lakers is where you can find our show, and then I'm at Anthony Irwin LA. If people want to follow for terrible jokes, and right now I'm tweeting about Seinfeld. So if people are interested about that, I can talk to them about that.
I saw those tweets you were throwing out saying about that the cell phone had ruined Seinfeld.
Right. I mean, if you watch an episode of Seinfeld, the cell phone just fixes so many things, right? There was an entire episode that took place in a Chinese restaurant where if they just call ahead with the cell phone and said, "Hey, can you take a reservation?" then they get in and they're fine. So, I mean, I love Seinfeld. I really, really do. The tweet that I just sent, we're really talking about Seinfeld right now, but I compared it to the triangle offense, where if you look at all of the sitcoms that are out there right now, they all use some aspect of the humor that was utilized in Seinfeld. But Seinfeld by itself, I think time has kind of passed by to a certain extent.
Have you seen, is it a Twitter handle? I think that it's Modern Seinfeld, where it's trying to relate modern situations to how it would unfold into a Seinfeld plot. That's pretty humorous, and that's
right.
Incorporating cell phone stuff.
Yeah, I'd watch that show. I'd watch Modern Seinfeld in a second.
Yeah, it's very humorous, just talking about anything that's sort of happening, but equating it with modern technology and modern situations. And I have to find the exact Twitter handle, but it is pretty good. All right, guys, thank you for before we start talking too much more Seinfeld, thank you for coming on. Thank you for spending the time to chat Lakers with me. Anthony, thank you.
Thank you, Josh, and you're more than welcome. You're going to come on our show and at least provide therapy for when I'm beating Harrison into oblivion this year.
I'm happy to do that. Harrison, thank you for coming on. I'm ready to provide you therapy.
All right, thanks for having us, Josh. I look forward to starting up Locked On Seinfeld with you next year too.
I'm down for that, no doubt. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.